listener production.
Hey, Sasha Barbagat with you. Welcome to The Briefing. Politicians that make it to the very top are some of the most powerful people in our society. They make decisions that affect just about everyone and make powerful friends behind closed doors in the process. So, how should we feel when one of these powerful pollies leaves office and quickly takes a job in the mining industry that, not too long ago, they were responsible for regulating?
I think what makes me nervous is when the industries that are most dependent on the decisions of parliamentarians are the industries gobbling up the former parliamentarians when they become available.
With former New South Wales Premier Dominic Perrottet becoming the latest high-powered MP to quit and join a mining company, we're asking, is something wrong with this picture? Our deep dive into the questionable crossover of politicians and corporations in the second half of this episode. First, though, let's get the day's top news stories with Simon Beaton. It is Wednesday, July 24.
Hi Sash, we start again today with US politics as Kamala Harris hosts her first campaign rally amid news she has enough support now to become the Democratic nominee for president. She spoke moments before we hit record, walking out to Freedom by Beyonce before talking about her time as a criminal prosecutor.
I took on perpetrators of all kinds. Predators who abused women, fraudsters who ripped off consumers, cheaters who broke the rules for their own gain. So hear me when I say, I know Donald Trump's type.
Wow, it's now almost a sure thing that Harris will become the nominee for the Democrats. She has secured enough delegates, they're the ones that'll vote at the convention next month, to claim the nomination.
Yeah. Meantime, the boss of the Secret Service has resigned following the assassination attempt on Donald Trump. Just yesterday, we were talking about Kimberly Cheadle's appearance at a House committee hearing where she insisted she was staying in the role. In her resignation letter, Cheadle took full responsibility for the security lapse that saw 20-year-old Thomas Crooks take up a position near Trump's rally and fire multiple shots, injuring the former president and killing a spectator. That's big news, Simon. There had been pressure from both the Republicans and the Democrats for Cheadle to fall on her sword on this. It was a huge lapse in security. She has acknowledged it herself. Look, going back to Kamala Harris, listening to that this morning, I watched, the first half of her speech, and you can see the difference in the energy around her. And I'm talking about the people around her. She had young women, young government representative women up on the stage introducing her. She walked out to Beyonce. Beyonce also gave permission for that song to be used. Not like Trump, where he uses songs and then the artists come out and say, can you please not use our song? He's only got like Kid Rock at the moment who lets him use anything. But speaking of that energy, so now she has raised more than $100 million US, that's 150 mil Australian, from 1.1 million different donors since Joe Biden stepped down. 62% of those donors are first-time contributors. And I think that speaks to, like I said, the energy that has kind of been kickstarted into this Democrats campaign, because it was, especially after the debate, it was feeling very, very flat. There's also been another poll released early this morning showing that Kamala Harris does have a slight lead over Donald Trump. It was a Reuters Ipsos survey and it was conducted on Monday and Tuesday after Joe Biden's departure from the race. It gave her 44% support nationally, and that is above Trump's 42%. There is another poll that has her like 2 percentage points behind. As we know, polls are not an exact science, but this is certainly more positive than what we were starting the week out with, where she was trailing Donald Trump in a lot of polls. Now, speaking of Biden, we have been waiting to hear from him formally about his withdrawal. He has now tested negative to COVID, according to the White House, and he will give his speech from the Oval Office at 10 a.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time. So keep an eye out for that one. Also, he's going to be meeting with Benjamin Netanyahu. He's still the president, so he still has a full dance card. And I feel like now his focus is going to be on backing Kamala Harris and I suppose enjoying his last 6 months in power. He is a career politician, so I'm sure this will be a hard time for him and he's going to enjoy what's left.
Further charges have been laid against Beau Lamarre-Condon, the former police officer accused of murdering Sydney couple Jessie Baird and Luke Davies back in February. The 29-year-old will also face 2 counts of domestic violence-related murder and 1 count of aggravated break and enter with intent to commit an indictable offence. It's alleged that Lamarre-Condon shot the Sydney couple with his New South Wales Police issued gun while off duty. The bodies of Jessie and Luke were found at a rural property in Goulburn more than a week after they were last seen. Lamarre-Condon has been in custody since he was charged. He'll face court again next month.
Sunday has been named the world's hottest day ever. The Copernicus Climate Change Service holds data that stretches back to 1940. It measures the average surface air temperature. Over the weekend, on Sunday, it hit 17.09 degrees Celsius. Now, the previous record was set on July 6 last year, and it was just behind it, 17.08. So it is a very small difference, but the service has come out to say that it is a concerning development to see that we are continuing to set records when it comes to the global temperature. In fact, the last 13 months have been record-setting, and 2024 is expected to be named the hottest year ever, beating out last year.
'Cause I'm Snoop Doggy, Doggy, Doggy.
And our final headline for this morning, Snoop Dogg has been announced as one of the final torchbearers ahead of the Paris Olympics. The American rapper and actor will carry the torch through the neighbourhood of Saint-Denis, the final stop of the Flames journey before reaching the Eiffel Tower.
This is so rogue, this decision.
Rogue.
Snoop's already landed in Paris. He sent out a tweet on X yesterday that read, "You ready? Paris 2024 Olympics, ya dig?" Sorry for that. I was like, why Snoop? Apparently he's going to be a regular commentator for America's NBC coverage of the games, and he's going to, hang out in Paris for the next couple of weeks. So, I mean, we have seen him do those nature documentary spoofs where he's just, but I mean, I guess he has a nice voice. He's chill. Like, it might be a different type of commentary to what we're used to if he's commentating something super fast. But go Snoop. Simon, thank you so much for this morning and for being here. Next up, it is our deep dive looking at the interesting and maybe concerning switch our pollies are making from Parliament to mining.
Hey, Bension here. Politicians do not have much in common with elite athletes, but here's one way in which they kind of do. Whether you're going for gold at the Paris Olympics or plotting your rise to the Prime Minister's office, living the dream is unlikely to be the last thing you do in your working life. Whether by physical injury or decline, or losing an election, these careers often have a hard end date that comes well before you can retire altogether. And it can be particularly tricky for politicians. Former New South Wales Premier Dominic Perrottet announced last week that he's quitting politics to take up a senior position with mining giant BHP in Washington. Former Western Australian Premier Mark McGowan made a similar move when he left politics to join the resources sector last year. So is it okay that they have followed in the footsteps of countless Aussie MPs over the years, jumping straight into a lucrative industry role straight after leaving politics? Richard Dennis heads up the Australia Institute. Richard, thanks so much for joining us on The Briefing. Let me take you through a quick scenario. You're an MP elected by your local constituents. You have a long career rising from backbencher to minister to the very top job. When that's all over, what is wrong with taking a job in the mining industry?
I don't think there's anything wrong with it, but I think what's wrong is why it is that mining companies that have got so many people across Australia they could employ to help them. What is it about former politicians that the resource industry thinks is so valuable? So most people probably wouldn't have thought that serving your local constituents, meeting with them regularly, asking them what was important to them, drafting legislation to help your local constituents, helping them solve problems dealing with their bureaucracy. It's kind of hard to believe that spending years or decades helping your local constituents would be of such enormous value to the resources industry that people would pay you very large sums of money to go and work for them. Like, what have these politicians been doing that makes them so valuable to the resources industry would be the question I ask.
Well, what do you think that they are doing that would be so valuable to the resources industry?
Well, wouldn't it be good to know? Wouldn't it be good if our freedom of information laws worked? Wouldn't it be good if we had public hearings in our Federal Corruption Commission? Wouldn't it be good if ministerial diaries were, always made available so we could see who was meeting with who? But yeah, it seems like a lot of politicians, while they're elected to serve their local constituency, seem to spend a lot of their time while they're in Parliament actually thinking about what do some big industries need? What does the fossil fuel industry need? What does the gambling industry need? What do the property developers need? And somehow when they retire from politics, all of a sudden, whereas you and I might struggle to get $500,000 or $800,000 or $1 million a year, we might struggle to get a job working with one of those industries. But somehow people that have been working in Parliament for a long time seem to walk straight into these jobs on a regular basis. So, yeah, I think as citizens, we should be really asking hard questions about what it is that our former politicians have been doing that makes them so well suited to these incredibly well-paid jobs.
What was your reaction to the former Premier of New South Wales, Dominic Perrottet, taking up a job with BHP?
Well, my reaction was, there's another one. So many former premiers, so many former resource ministers seem to walk straight out of Parliament and into such roles. I mean, the former Premier of Western Australia did it recently, and at a federal level, federal resource ministers, typically go straight off to work as lobbyists for or employees of the resources industry. So, I thought, that didn't take long. Usually they kind of focus on how they needed to spend time with family, or, there's a whole bunch of reasons they were leaving Parliament. But to announce, hey, I'm quitting, but as luck would have it, a very, very well-paid job just fell into my lap. I thought the timing was cuter than usual.
What should a politician who's been at the top level do when they get to the end of their political career? Because if you're a state premier, for example, or a prime minister, your decisions basically affect all industries. Is it even possible to have a job after politics without some kind of conflict of interest?
Oh, of course it is. But I think there are some industries that are uniquely dependent on the government. So if you think about the mining industry, it's the Australian citizens that says, here, you can have the iron ore, here, you can have the gas, here, you can have the coal, you go sell it. So there are particular industries that, really owe the overwhelming percentage of their profits effectively to the state. They're a gift of the state. We give them our resources, they pull them out of the ground and sell them. Similarly, industries like tobacco and alcohol and gambling, they're very, very heavily regulated industries for all sorts of good reasons. But in turn, those industries spend far more time thinking about what Parliament's doing and what policy is and what the tax system is and what the regulation system is. This small number of very profitable industries spend far more time thinking about politics and policy than, people running a cafe, people building all sorts of things. So I think what makes me nervous is when the industries that are most dependent on the decisions of parliamentarians are the industries gobbling up the former parliamentarians when they become available.
I just want to try and pin down what the precise problem is with this cycle that you're describing, because obviously many politicians have gone straight into the industries that they were effectively regulating just after their career. Are you saying that the problem could be that someone who's in a top political position could be making laws or making policy in a way that might give them a better chance of having a job after politics?
I think there's multiple problems. One of the problems is, as I said before, what is it about former politicians that these industries see as so valuable? So on the one hand, I think there's no doubt that some industries are desperate to get their hands on former politicians who they think have a really intimate, detailed knowledge of the policy-making process and the internal politics of different political parties, because those industries want to exert influence over those political processes. So that's a problem. And then, of course, the other problem is if politicians are thinking, well, when I get out of here, who can pay me the most? When I get out of here, which industries are going to be most lucrative for me? If politicians are thinking like that when they're still in Parliament, then of course that should be a concern to voters who are putting them there, because again, they're supposed to be there to represent us. They're supposed to be representing their local constituency. They're supposed to be representing the state, not thinking, gee, if I play my cards right, I might get a very well-paid job working for one of the industries that cares most about government policy. So that's why other countries have all sorts of limitations on these so-called revolving door job opportunities. Other countries have taken this very seriously. In Australia, we've dabbled with it at certain points in time, but we've never been very enthusiastic about it. And indeed, as the fact that we're having this conversation makes clear, we kind of think it's normal. We kind of think, well, what's wrong with that? Well, again, other democracies think it's a real problem.
So what would you like to see legislated if you were in an ideal world to stop this problem that you're describing? What should the law be?
I think we need multiple laws to address these things. First and foremost, we need transparency. We need it to be really easy to see ministerial diaries, to know who they're meeting with. It needs to be really easy for citizens to use things like freedom of information laws to see what advice ministers were given before they made certain decisions. And similarly, we need to have really well-funded and transparent corruption watchdogs, so that we've actually got a watchdog who's looking out for the decision-making while people are in Parliament. All of those things are essential. And when politicians leave Parliament, I think there should be a minimum 3 or 5 years between leaving a role in public office and then taking up a role in the private sector, where the knowledge and experience and networks that you gained in your ministerial role mean that you will be of particular value to particular industries and particular companies. And really, if that discourages someone from being a minister, if that discourages someone from being a premier, good. Doesn't sound like they're the right people to want to do it.
But many politicians get to the top of their career and end their career well before they're ready to actually retire from the workforce. Are you really saying that they should wait 3 years before getting another job if they're in like a high power position like Premier or Prime Minister?
I'm saying they should wait 3 or 5 years before taking the kind of job that relies on the knowledge, experience, insight and networks they built in their role. So I got no problem with someone finishing up as a premier and going off and working in a law firm, or going off and working as an academic, or going back and being a doctor, or going off and being a tradie, or whatever. What were they doing before they went into politics? These people weren't working as government relations people for the resources industry or the gambling industry before they went into Parliament. Why do we think that after they leave Parliament they should get an even better paid job working for one of the industries that cares most about the decisions that our parliaments make?
Well, Richard, it's a fascinating question and a fascinating conversation. Thanks so much for joining us on The Briefing.
Thank you.
Richard Dennis there. Thanks for listening to this episode of The Briefing. That's it for now. Before you go, though, we'd love it if you could share this app with someone you think might enjoy it. If you want to keep up with our other content, you can check us out on Instagram at The Briefing Podcast, and on TikTok and YouTube, just search Listener Newsroom. And we'll be back in your feed with another ep this afternoon from 3. I'm Bension Siebert. Catch you next time.
Listener.